Hello, Pastor Rich here again with another 12-minute mark. Here we're getting ready to finish chapter 6 of the Gospel. And as I mentioned at the end of our last section, we were going to have another sandwich. And if you don't know what the sandwich is, you can go back and look at our last episode. But it's where the story begins, and then there's another story, and then the first story finishes. As you read Mark, or really any of the Gospels, sometimes it can come off as if all the stories are sort of isolated, like a pearl necklace, that they're just, any old pearl will do after the next one, and it creates one nice big gospel, but all these are not related. But in fact, these stories are all put together in a particular order, sometimes chronologically, sometimes to speak to a theme. And there's a theology, a purpose, a mission behind each gospel writer for what they're trying to say at any given time. And that here's what we see in 6. He just went to his hometown of Nazareth and was rejected by them. And then he sends out that first piece of bread. He sends out his disciples, and they go out 2 by 2. They take virtually nothing with them, knowing that they'll get by just on the provision of God and the kindness and hospitality of those that will have them into their homes. And all this is going on, and because the disciples are going on, Jesus' name is now spread exponentially out into the whole region. And so then starting in verse 14, we'll see Herod. King Herod, he heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. And for some were saying, John the Baptist has been raised from the dead, and that's why miraculous powers are at work in him. Others said he's Elijah, and then others still said, well, he's just a prophet, like one of the prophets back in the old days. But Herod said, it's John, whom I beheaded. He's been raised from the dead. For John was arrested by Herod. He had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John was saying, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Well, Herodias, she had a grudge against John and wanted to kill him, but she could not, because Herod protected John, knowing that he was a holy and righteous man. He feared him. He loved to listen to them, even though he was greatly puzzled by him when he heard him. Well, finally, an opportune time arose. On Herod's birthday, he threw himself a big birthday party, inviting all the military commanders, the leading officials, and just the leading men of Israel. And when Herodias' daughter came and danced, she really pleased Herod and the dinner guests. So much so that he swore to her on oath, ask me for anything you want. And with making his oath, he said, up to half my kingdom. Well, the girl, she ran out and asked her mother, what should I ask for? The head of John the Baptist, she replied. So she went back in and told Herod, give me now on a platter the head of John the Baptist. Herod was greatly distressed, but because of his oaths and his dinner guests, he would not refuse her. So he sent word to the prison to have the executioner behead John and to send his head on a platter. Then he gave it to the girl, who gave it to her mother. And then John's disciples came and laid his body in a tomb. The disciples gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. And since there was such a big crowd there that they couldn't even eat, Jesus said, come by yourselves to a solitary place where you can get some rest. All right, we'll stop there. That's the meat and the second piece of bread of our sandwich that creates this theme. And hopefully you've been able to maybe read that and say, wow, there's something tying together what John the Baptist is and in relation to this story of the disciples being sent and returning. But first, we'll go ahead and look at this story of the Baptist. Mark is so absolutely fixated on the life of Jesus that these few verses about John the Baptist is the only section in the entire book that isn't explicitly about the life of Jesus. Now, there's a lot of history here, a lot of background, and this Herod here is the son of the Herod who was king during the birth of Jesus. Right before the birth, the wise men, they come, and they come, and Herod says, "Go find him so I can worship them." Of course, that's a lie, and Herod gives the order to, when he can't find Jesus, to kill all of those baby boys that are born in that region. And so here we see the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree. This Herod doesn't have quite the authority that his father had, but he is cunning and crafty and driven by lust and power. And it's almost typical. We see Herod, and later on, in another week or so, in Holy Week, we'll see Pilate. And they're basically hand in glove with one another. They represent a political type of power that seems to have everything they need, everything they want, except any moral substance. So Herod he's in an unlawful relationship. His wife is his sister-in-law, and there's all kinds of intermarriage and incest and murder in these families. It's complicated. You can look it up to see who married who, when they divorced and remarried, and all this. But John the Baptist, he's the kind of guy, as you can imagine, who calls a spade, and he goes to Herod and says, you're unlawfully married to your brother's wife. And this is another picture of John the Baptist being like Elijah again. Elijah, he stood up against Ahab and Jezebel, and he was on the run because of that. And here, this John the Baptist, coming just like one Elijah, he does the same thing. He goes to those in power and calls them out. There's nothing politically correct about these guys at all, and it gets them in trouble. And so you have Herod, who really likes John. He knows he's righteous, and he knows he's holy, and he knows that he's not. And so he's got him locked away to satisfy the desires of his new stolen wife from his brother. But he's not going to harm him, and she's probably been trying to get him to kill her for some time. And it says then the opportunity arises in which there is this birthday party. He throws himself, and these can go on for weeks, and he's invited all the important people to his party. And the drinking ensues, and in a drunken stupor, Salome, who we know her name from the other Gospels, will come out, the daughter of Herodias. And she dances, probably some sort of erotic type of dance. She could be nude or close to it. And it says, she pleased Herod and all the dinner guests. And in his drunken state, he, starts making promises. The abuse of power and lack of leadership starts making these promises. And, up to half my kingdom is just a figure of speech. That's just to say, go ahead and ask me, I'll do what you want. And of course, she goes out to mom. So we see that this is really the mother's plot, and says, that's it. You have to kill him. Not only kill him, but actually bring his head back on a platter. And so that's what he does, because he knows the right thing to do. Because it said he feared him, he knew he was holy, he knew he was righteous. He has all this knowledge of knowing what to do, but it doesn't matter. He is going to, it says, because of his foolish promise and the reputation, because he made the promise in front of all the important people, he's going to preserve his reputation rather than do what's right. And, that's a constant temptation, not just for those who are in great leadership, but for all people, to go with the flow John the Baptist is this righteous person. He's never going with the flow. He's doing what's right. And unfortunately, the leaders there, their government, are going with whatever's popular in the moment. So then it happens, and his followers, John's disciples, come and take the rest of his body and put it in a tomb. And then a very abrupt ending, and we go to now all the apostles have come back, and they're just on cloud nine. They're just so excited to tell Jesus everything they had done. And it's kind of weird to stick that, this sandwich, to have that meat in front of the disciples coming and going. And this is a sandwich that talks about the cost of discipleship. They go out and they experience great success. John the Baptist, who had been in a ministry for longer, finally met his demise when he made enough enemies based upon the truth that he would preach. And so we see this this is the message of what happens, or what can happen, to those who go out and speak the truth. And it's also a foreshadowing. I said last time, a foreshadowing of them going out 2 by 2 is a foreshadowing of the book of Acts. Here, the beheading of John, the meat part of the sandwich, is a foreshadowing of what will happen to all these apostles, except maybe John, the one whom Jesus loved, who maybe died of old age. But the other, and Judas would kill himself, but the other 10, we believe, probably all had a martyr's death, just like John the Baptist did. And so it's a foreshadowing of what they will experience. It was great this first time, but the cost of discipleship could be your life. And that's the message. Well, they're getting ready to now take a little picnic. We'll see that on next time. One of the funniest stories in the Gospels. And we'll see you next time tomorrow for 12 Minute Mark. God bless you.